My thieving mother-in-law stole my collection of vintage skeleton keys to buy herself a phone, and my wife is begging me not to press charges, but I'm not listening to her. My mother-in-law is insanely entitled, and my wife's enabling of her has made our marriage very hard at times. My mother-in-law has come to us for money a lot because she keeps spending herself into a hole since she's a hoarder. Her house is full of garbage and is rodent-infested too. She has one semi-clean room in the whole building, and it's the master bedroom. She's mocked it up like a little studio apartment with a futon to sleep on and use as a couch, an entertainment center with TV and streaming, and a makeshift kitchen consisting of the adjoining bathroom, a mini fridge and a microwave. Recently she came to us wanting me specifically to buy her a new smartphone as an unprompted gift, and she threw a massive fit when I refused, literally dropping to her knees and crying. After I kept refusing, she yelled at us that we're supposed to be pampering her now that she's an old woman. My wife insisted I get her the phone, but I kept refusing. Now, I have quite a collection of vintage skeleton keys. Like ones to particular hotels, the large ornate sergeants, brass railroad keys, reading hardware, etc. My collection as a whole should easily be worth $3,000 to $4,000. Some of those keys are super rare. I kept them in a locked display cabinet. But a few days ago I came home to find my entire collection gone. The cabinet had been forced open. I checked the CCTV for the living room, and saw my mother-in-law force open the cabinet with a small crowbar. She then put all the keys in a couple of boxes she'd brought with her and left with them. I called my mother-in-law right away and demanded she return my collection. She nonchalantly told me she sold the entire collection at pawn already, and used the money for her new phone. Then said it was my fault, and she had to do it because I wouldn't give her the money. My wife was seemingly on my side, until I said I was going to call the police. She begged me to just drop it. And even suggested I just start a new collection. I refused to let it go, because a lot of those keys are not only expensive, they're irreplaceable. I spent 10 years building that collection. But my wife kept blowing up at me and telling me to just let it go. I refused to listen, and the police came to take my statement the next day. I had video footage, and the documentation of my collection ready. And then there were some texts I went out of my way to get from my mother-in-law to bait her into a confession. I wanted as much evidence as possible so she couldn't lie to the police. When I texted her demanding she get my collection back, she actually LOL'd and told me not a chance. And even boasted that she thought I was a pathetic son-in-law, and my key collection was tacky anyway. I told her to at least tell me what pawn shop she sold the keys to so I could go buy them back, and how much they paid her for them. And the dimwit admitted it all right away with glee and text. I had everything I needed for the police before they even showed up. The cops took the whole matter more seriously than I thought. I was worried they'd call it a civil matter since the thief was my mother-in-law, and she had a key to the house. But they arrested my mother-in-law before long. And the police went to the pawn shop before it closed to retrieve my collection. I got it all back from the police after a couple of days. And for the moment I've put the collection in a safe, secure place that no one can get to. The pawn shop pretty much gave up the entire key collection to police right away like it was a bag of hot potatoes. From her texts before, I found out my mother-in-law sold the whole collection to the pawn for a whopping total of $300. For a collection of hundreds of antique keys valued at $3,000 to $4,000 as a total, that low number felt like a punch in the gut to me. Now, the cost of repayment to the shop was supposed to be on the mother-in-law. But my wife paid them back out of our joint account instead. From what the shop owner said, mother-in-law told them the key collection belonged to her deceased husband. And just to be clear, she's not a widow. Her husband divorced her and left the state around 15 years ago. Mother-in-law lives off Social Security and food stamps. She also doesn't drive, she gets around on an electric scooter that tows a bicycle trailer. She lives in a long paid-off house, and she would not be having money troubles if she wasn't overspending every month. And she always counts on my wife to pick up the slack when she comes up short. My wife and I got in a huge fight when she got home because I had her mother arrested. But I told her I'm done with her enabling of her toxic mother. I said I was changing the locks ASAP and banning her mother from the house. And I also said that either we got marriage counseling, or I'd be inquiring about my options for separation from an attorney. I thought my wife would beg me not to do that. But instead she just called me horrible, packed a suitcase and walked out to go to a motel. I just sat on the couch and let her go. She repeatedly looked like she was waiting for me to ask her to stay. But I didn't. In the morning she texted me she'd be bailing her mother out, and wanted me to transfer her the money to pay for it since I was the one who got her mother arrested. When I said no, all I got back was a sarcastic wow, and that was it. Not too long later I had a gut feeling and checked the balance on the shared bank account. And my wife had taken out a lot of money. I wasn't sure if all that was needed for bail, so I called the pawn shop later. The owner confirmed my wife had come in and paid him back the $300 that he'd paid her mother for the keys. He was also quite angry and said he didn't want any of us in his shop ever again. I tried to call and text my wife for hours, but she didn't answer. That evening I managed to find her. I knew which motel she'd likely go to, and I was right. It was both cheap and not far away. I found her car, and then figured out which room she was in. She looked positively shocked to see me when she opened the door. I confronted her about the money she'd used from our shared account. She basically said that since I refused to pay her mother's bail after I was the one who had her arrested, she got the money from me another way. Then smugly stated she wasn't paying that money back into the shared account this time, and told me that's the karma I get, before shutting the door in my face. Then said through the door she'd call the cops on me if I didn't leave. I already knew my marriage was pretty much over. But that night it really sank in. I had a long sit down with some old video games and cola to think about my future. The next day I changed the locks on the house and removed all of my money from the joint bank account, and stopped all automated payments to and from it. I made sure to take only the amount of money I'd put into the account. She can have her thieving hoarder mommy all to herself now. We both have very comparable incomes, so I'll be pushing for a clean split divorce. This woman didn't deserve me, and I fell for her act. She didn't want a husband, she wanted an insurance plan.